When a game starts with the phrase "every choice matters," you expect that the game will have plenty of player choice and make them feel like they are shaping the journey of the protagonist. Unfortunately, going into She Sees Red, you'll find that there isn't much in terms of interactivity, and you have little involvement in shaping how the story unfolds. That's not to say that this game is a massive disappointment. There are many elements to She Sees Red that intrigue me, and for anyone that is a full motion video game or interactive movie fan, this may be a game to look at and maybe add to your Steam library. She Sees Red looks at the dark underground world of a Russian nightclub, with the story taking place within two timelines. One following a young detective who is investigating the murder of a nightclub worker, and the other following the murderer as the action happens, who looks to be getting revenge on the owner of the club. The story seems pretty simple at the start, with the murder appearing to be an obvious case of who was involved and how it all happened. As things progress, it becomes clear that there was more to it than this one-off incident. The story progresses, and depending on your choices, comes to one of 4 different endings. The runtime is unfortunately really short, with a single playthrough taking around 30 to 45 minutes, but the game highly encourages you to go back and play multiple times so you can unveil the whole story. The aim of the game being to unlock all of the 62 scenes the game has to offer. Overall, the story is actually pretty good at times. It has some moments in it that will shock you, it has some nice twists and turns that I didn't expect, and the setting and the tone was executed well. On top of that, the acting, delivered in Russian, was really great and convincing. Most of the characters delivered their lines with urgency and no one really fell flat. There were some cliched characters within the story, most notably the nightclub owner and the young detective, who had some lines that felt ripped out of a cheap Bond film, but luckily there were only a few of these moments within the game.
Just because I'm the owner of this club, you think I'm a bad guy too, is that right?
The English dubbing is a bit hit and miss, with a lot of characters sounding really off. The nightclub boss, for example, sounded very wrong compared to what the character looked like and the way he acted. He reminded me of an evil villain from an early 2000s game. It was overly deep and so stereotypical bad guy for me that just took me out of the experience every time he spoke. The other characters are okay sounding, but the best experience for me was listening to the dialogue in Russian with English subtitles. It just feels more real. It's such a shame that there are quite a few spelling errors in the subtitles, however that's a far superior way to play. The real shining light for this game was the way that it was shot. Cinematically, this game is beautiful with some fantastic lighting and cinematography. From the offset, you really get the feeling that games like this and Erica are the future of full motion video genre, pulling together a great cinematic experience along with gameplay. If this is the standard to expect from the full motion video genre, then I'm excited to see more. It really is great to have these well shot cinematic worlds come together and be able to actually involved in these worlds. Long gone are the days of the terrible 90s green screen full motion video games where it looks so low budget.
That's what I have. That's what I have.
But back to the story, it was a bit of a shame how short each playthrough was, and it left me frustrated by how each ending was always left so open. And even when I unlocked all the endings, I still felt like I didn't truly know what had happened. The actors put in some great performances despite the questionable English dubbing, and the way the whole game was shot really was at a high professional standard. But now comes the gameplay, and this is where the overall experience goes downhill. The ultimate problem with She Sees Red's gameplay was that, well, there's barely any of it. More move the mouse and click on the text box that appears at set times. This game offers many different choices when playing through the story, and each of those choices change the scene and reveal something different. As mentioned earlier, to truly understand everything within this game's story, you will need to go back and play through every single scene and try something different to unlock new scenes and reveal all the endings. This is a good idea to make players experiment more in their choices, but the problem is, after one playthrough, to sit through some of the same scenes again becomes a bit repetitive, and although it changes later on, watching the same scenes as before again and again just gets a bit old and loses any form of immersion. You can skip scenes you've already seen after the first playthrough, but for me that just seems really pointless and takes you out of the game completely. The lack of choices wouldn't be that much of an issue if they had a bit more of an impact to them. For example, some of the choices make your character do specific objectives. Right at the beginning, you get the choice between searching the room or leaving straight away. An interesting choice that I wanted to play around with. I went for search the room, but I wasn't actually able to search anything myself. That choice was taken straight out of my hands and the character found an item. I didn't get to look at a specific shelf, it was all scripted and I, the player, didn't have any say in how or what I searched for. In another scene, I was hiding from a character down the hall. I get the two choices pop up again. One is to continue to hide and the other is to cause a distraction. I chose to do the distraction, and as soon as I did, the character did everything for me. I didn't get to choose how I distracted them or what with. Everything was pre-scripted, and it just made me feel like I wasn't fully involved with the shaping of the story. There was also no real threat or risk to my choices. I never had to worry about my character being caught or losing out on something. Every choice I made felt really safe, and after a certain point, all I needed to do was just find the extra scene that I hadn't seen before, instead of being invested in the outcome of my choice. For a game that states that every choice you make changes the story, I felt like they could have added more choices that made the player think and feel a bit threatened, made choices that put the character in real danger, and made the player want to go back and try things differently, as opposed to just choosing other options in a 50-50 choice. Hell, even Bandersnatch had you die because of some of the choices. This game doesn't really give you any of that. She Sees Red is an interactive movie. It's lacking anything that labels it as a game. Some would say that it draws similarities to other games within the genre like Late Shift and the infectious madness of Dr. Decker, but for me those games stand above She Sees Red and give the player choices that make them want to go back and play it again and again, uncovering new things. For me, She Sees Red became a bit of a chore to get through, especially in the fourth playthrough. I really wanted to uncover everything the game had to offer, and I did, but I can't say I was enjoying my gameplay by the final credit roll. She Sees Red showed a lot of promise in its cinematic execution. The performances are of a really high standard, and the overall story was one that I liked in parts. Although I really wish that its endings were a bit more clear instead of leaving it completely open all the time. With a bit more focus on the choice system and a more complex story branch, then I would be all for recommending this game, or interactive movie, whatever you want to call it. But because of the lackluster choices and the lack of any real player interactivity, it made going back and playing the game all the way through again a chore. It's certainly a start from developer Rhino Tales, and maybe with a bigger budget they can continue to make these beautiful looking full motion video games, but this time with a bigger focus on how to create an in-depth, replayable, story-driven game that really makes the player feel like they are making a difference every time they hit play. My friend Robin, who owns Coaching for Geeks, a really great website that you should go and check out, played it on the iOS, and he said this: it's a good few pounds cheaper than on Steam if you play it on the iOS. It's a shame that the sound cuts out between each scene rather than flowing seamlessly from one choice to the next, and the English voice acting is pretty terrible. She Sees Red won't change the course of full motion video gaming, but it's a fun distraction for a couple of hours. For me, this game could have been something good, but unfortunately it's average at best, and it's really not as good as games like Erica, for example. So if you do like interactive movies, then maybe this is the game for you, but for now,